This is the GoreTV podcast with your hosts Jill Valentine and Sebastian Castellanos. Let's get into the show.
Get ready for, I guess you could say, a deep dive right into a Gothic nightmare, because today we're diving into Bloodborne.
Oh, a great choice.
This game, it's not just about jump scares, right? It's this whole other thing. It weaves this tapestry of dread that sticks with you even after you put the controller down, you know? So we're gonna figure out why it's considered a horror masterpiece. And for this descent into darkness, we're using GoreTV's deep dive.
I think what makes Bloodborne work so well is the dread. And it's not through any overt scares or anything like that. It's the atmosphere, right?
Right.
The city of Yharnam, the primary location of the game, is practically a character itself.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, GoreTV describes it as the city consumed by disease and decay, and you really feel that weight, you know what I mean? Like, it's in the descriptions of winding alleys, these towering cathedrals just shrouded in mist. You feel like the city itself is closing in on you.
And it's not even just the broad strokes, you know, it's the architectural details that really hammer it home, right? The grotesque gargoyles and the imposing iron gates. Everything just makes you feel like Yharnam is hostile, almost intentionally designed to disorient you as the player.
And then there are the citizens, or I guess what's left of them, right? They're transformed into these horrifying beasts by, well, their dependence on this blood-fueled healing. It makes you think about societal collapse and how fragile humanity really is.
Totally. It begs the question, what happens when our attempts to heal, to cure ourselves, become twisted and corrupted? These citizens are driven to these monstrous forms by this need, this dependence on blood. It's a scary look into our potential for darkness.
Yeah. GoreTV uses the cleric beast as an example, and it's a good one, right? This towering skeletal figure was once a revered member of the healing church, but becomes this terrifying symbol of Yharnam's downfall.
A perfect example, and we see that tragic transformation reflected in a lot of the beasts that stalk Yharnam. Each one is a reminder of what happens when we succumb to our baser instincts. And speaking of the beasts, their designs, right?
Oh, totally. The stuff of nightmares. GoreTV was all over those designs. But it's more than just being scary, isn't it? These creatures, they tap into something deeper, something primal, I think.
It's not just about being repulsive, although that's definitely a part of it. These designs represent our deepest fears, loss of control, our minds and bodies betraying us, being consumed by something monstrous. It's all there.
Yeah, like that blood-starved beast they mention. The image of this skinless, rabid creature consumed by agony. It's a visceral representation of our fear of physical pain and the potential for our own bodies to turn against us.
Exactly. Each beast represents a different aspect of existential horror. They're not just enemies to be defeated, they're manifestations of our potential for darkness.
Right.
And that's much scarier than any monster, don't you think?
Oh, 100%. But it gets even more terrifying, right? Because Bloodborne introduces the great ones. Even GoreTV, these seasoned horror fans, called them the ultimate expression of horror.
And here, Bloodborne goes beyond traditional horror into cosmic horror. These beings are beyond human comprehension. They inspire a primal fear of the unknown. It's the fear of being insignificant when faced with the vastness and indifference of the cosmos.
It's very Lovecraftian, like H.P. Lovecraft's work, where the real horror is realizing how small and insignificant we are. GoreTV picked up on that too.
For sure. Consider the Orphan of Cos, this twisted, almost tragic figure, or Ibrietas, daughter of the cosmos, who defies any natural order. These aren't just monsters. They embody a cosmic indifference that's so much scarier than a physical threat.
GoreTV makes a good point, right? The great ones are more than challenging boss fights. They represent the ultimate unknown. It's that fear that we are just tiny specks in a universe full of things that we can't even begin to understand.
And speaking of things we can't understand, what about those nightmare realms? Oh yeah, those nightmare realms. GoreTV described them as places where reality breaks down completely. They highlighted the nightmare of Mensis and the hunter's nightmare, these twisted landscapes where logic and reason go to die.
It's the warping of reality that makes them so scary, right? Like, you never know what's real, what's a dream. It's like you're stuck in a fever dream.
Absolutely. You are confronted with distorted landscapes, grotesque imagery, impossible structures. It's designed to disorient you, to make you question your sanity.
GoreTV nailed it. They described it as being trapped in a fever dream. That captures those areas perfectly. It's brilliant, but utterly terrifying game design.
And it's not just about messing with the player's mind. These realms reflect the characters' struggles, how their sanity is breaking down after seeing so much horror.
It's like the game is saying that the scariest monsters are not out there in the dark, but inside of us, in our minds. And speaking of inner darkness, we have to talk about the plague ravaging Yharnam.
For sure. The plague isn't just a physical disease, it's a deeper corruption, eating away at the city from the inside.
GoreTV thought it was interesting how the healing church, the institution meant to heal, is actually the source of the plague. It's ironic, right? This unchecked ambition to heal leads to widespread death and madness.
Totally. It shows the dangers of chasing a goal without considering the consequences. The healing church, blinded by this pursuit of power, unleashes something they can't control.
And the imagery of this plague, right? Blood-stained streets, bodies piled high, the infected begging for mercy. It's a grim picture.
GoreTV sees the plague as this metaphor for our destructive tendencies, our dependencies. Like how the citizens of Yharnam become slaves to blood, we can become enslaved to power, technology, ideologies, and the results are just as bad.
And this is all made even more unsettling, more effective by Bloodborne sound design, right? GoreTV raves about it, calling it a symphony of fear.
It's not the constant noise or jump scares at work here. It's the silences. It's those quiet moments punctuated by a distant growl or whispers carried on the wind, the creaking of chains. Even the music seems to come from the walls themselves.
It keeps you on edge. You're never quite sure when or where the next scare is coming from. GoreTV is right. The music adds to that feeling of vulnerability, of dread.
Absolutely. The music reflects the fear you're experiencing perfectly, whether it's the somber hymns or those jarring, crazy tracks during boss fights.
It all comes together to create this immersive experience, don't you think? But we've only scratched the surface of Bloodborne's Gothic nightmare. We still need to explore the hunt, the ever-present force driving the story forward.
Yes, definitely. And what about that ending? What about all of the implications and lingering questions it raises?
Don't worry, we'll be right back to unpack all of that, right here on The Deep Dive.
This is the GoreTV podcast.
Picking up right where we left off, still thinking about Yharnam and those nightmarish depths. We were talking about the plague, but there's something else, something always present in the game, don't you think?
The hunt itself.
Yeah, exactly.
GoreTV talked about it some, but it's so vague. We're told to seek pale blood, but why? Who are we even doing this for? Bloodborne never really tells you.
Right. It's like being dropped right into a nightmare with no explanation. You just have to find your way through the darkness and try to make sense of it all. But maybe that's more effective than explaining everything, you know?
Definitely, it's that fear of the unknown. You're left to fill in the blanks with your own anxieties and interpretations of the hunt. But you start to realize the hunt itself is as much a curse as it is some noble duty. It traps everyone in this cycle of violence with no end.
It all goes back to those themes of humanity's darker impulses, right? We see it with the beasts, the healing church, and its arrogance, this need to hunt no matter the cost.
Bloodborne doesn't give you easy answers or shy away from how bleak human nature can be. It forces us to look at our potential for darkness and that resilience, how we keep fighting, even when faced with something unimaginable.
And talk about facing the unimaginable, we have to talk about that ending. GoreTV called it haunting, and I have to agree. It's not your typical happy ending, is it?
It's ambiguous. Bloodborne doesn't give you a nice little bow to tie everything up, does it? It leaves you with even more questions, which is more unsettling, more thought-provoking than an easy answer.
Yes, you think.
100%. It goes back to that cosmic horror, the idea that some things will always be beyond us, things we can't control, can't understand. We can fight against the darkness, sure, but escaping it completely, that might not even be possible.
Yeah, and GoreTV, they said playing Bloodborne is an essential journey if you want to understand how deep horror can go in gaming.
Which I think means it's more than just scares, right? It's the atmosphere, those incredible creatures, the way the game plays, all those things working together. GoreTV also called the sound design a symphony of fear, which is a great way to put it.
It is masterful, the way they use silence, those ambient noises. It keeps you on edge, always waiting for the next encounter. It plays on that natural fear of what we can't see coming.
Like the game is messing with you, getting under your skin, making you question every shadow and creak on the floorboards. And that's what Bloodborne is so good at, creating this atmosphere of dread that stays with you long after you turn the game off. Making you jump is one thing, but leaving you feeling uneasy, like something is always lurking just out of sight, That's something else.
It's the difference between a quick scare and something that really sticks with you.
Exactly. Bloodborne gets at those primal fears, the fear of the unknown, of losing control, the darkness inside all of us. It doesn't hold your hand. You just get thrown into this world, this nightmare, and have to put the pieces together yourself.
And that makes the whole thing even more powerful.
Right. It makes you an active participant in your own descent into darkness. You're not just watching a horror movie, you're living in one.
So going back to what we talked about earlier, would you say Bloodborne is more than your average horror game?
Definitely. It goes way beyond that. It's a work of art, using horror to explore bigger themes.
Yeah.
The complexities of humanity, what fear really is, the nature of existence itself.
GoreTV called it an essential journey, and they were right.
And I'd even recommend it to anyone who likes games that are different, that will stick with them. Even if someone doesn't love horror, there's a lot to think about, a lot to appreciate in this game.
This deep dive into Yharnam has been incredible. It's amazing how video games can tell stories like this, how they can make you explore the depths of being human.
Yeah, and Bloodborne shows us that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones we create ourselves.
And on that thought, we'll leave you to think about those horrors we talked about today. But we're not quite finished. There's still more to talk about. We'll be back in a bit with the final part of our deep dive into Bloodborne, right here on The Deep Dive.
This is the GoreTV podcast.
And we're back, wrapping up our deep dive into everything Bloodborne. For all the talk about nightmares and cosmic horror, I keep thinking about that word GoreTV used. Masterpiece.
Interesting word to use, right?
Yeah.
Masterpiece means it's more than just a scary game. It's like they were carefully creating an experience, something that sticks with you.
Exactly. Bloodborne blends those terrifying elements with moments that are actually kind of beautiful, even if they are bleak. Like those Gothic environments, the details and the creature designs, even the music.
It's a good point. That mix of dark and light, that's what makes Bloodborne more than just a horror game. You're disgusted,
Yeah.
but you can't look away. You're terrified, but you're also exhilarated. It really shows how powerful atmosphere can be in horror.
GoreTV definitely got that, especially when it came to the sound design, which they called a symphony of fear. Perfect description.
Oh, it's so effective. Those long stretches of quiet where all you hear is the wind, or some water dripping, maybe a howl in the distance. It makes you so tense, like something is out there, but you can't see it.
The game really knows how to use anticipation, right? Makes you more afraid of what you might see or hear more than any jump scare.
Exactly. Bloodborne understands that true horror is in those moments between the scares, in the silence, the shadows, where our imaginations take over. And it doesn't treat you like you're dumb. It lets you find the pieces of this nightmare and come to your own conclusions about the horror.
Which takes us back to that question we keep asking. Is Bloodborne more than just a horror game?
It goes way beyond, I think. It uses horror to explore big ideas about humanity, our place in the universe, what it means to exist and be afraid.
It's the kind of game that you don't forget, that makes you think, that makes you realize what video games are capable of.
Absolutely. It shows how powerful interactive storytelling can be. Games can be these really deep, thought-provoking experiences.
Remember GoreTV calling Bloodborne an essential journey for any horror fan?
They nailed it. But you know what? I'd recommend it to anyone who wants a gaming experience that they'll remember, even if they aren't into horror.
It's chilling and, yeah, kind of beautiful, but completely unforgettable.
It's a good reminder, though, that the things that scare us most, those unknowns, that loss of control, even the darkness inside us, those things are part of what makes us human.
And on that happy note, we'll leave you to think about all of this. This has been The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into, well, something totally different.